So in your lifetime, a person, can expect there's a 15 to 20% chance that you will have an anxiety disorder or an episode of severe anxiety in your lifetime. So it's the highest prevalence of all anxiety disorders. And in our current state of affairs, it's probably going to increase. I mean, look everywhere you look, Ebola, ISIS, I don't know, coyotes, ED, it's just like, oh my God. I mean, do I get on the plane? The plane they can't find, now they're looking again. It's like, oh my God, So there's a lot that we have that, and being made aware of all of these things all the time can really heighten your anxiety. Sometimes it's better just to sort of not know. So there is an age progression in the presentation for anxiety. So littler kids, we're going to see more separation anxiety and specific phobias, being afraid of the dark, being afraid of, snakes, being afraid of very specific things, where as they get older, we see more social phobia and then onset of panic, generalized anxiety disorder, and agoraphobia. And I've actually seen this in some of my patients who are younger, having real difficulties with separation anxiety. And then we'll really go on. I have a little guy who's, about 10, who's really started having panic. And when he was little, in terms of the separation anxiety and the other kinds of anxiety, we could kind of manage that with cognitive behavioral therapy or other types of behavioral interventions. But once he started having panic attacks, then it was interfering. He wanted to come home from Hawaii because he was scared there was going to be a tsunami. And he couldn't breathe, and Mom took him to the emergency room because she thought he was having a heart attack, and he thought he was having a heart attack. And what you'll find with anxiety is it becomes sort of like a snowball effect, especially if there's symptoms of panic. Because like I said, they're physiologic. So the person's heart is racing, his heart may skip a beat, they may start sweating, all of these, fight or flight responses, and then that makes the person more afraid, like, oh my God, I can't breathe, what's wrong? And then the anxious parent or sibling or grandparent, and everybody's just, kind of going crazy. So sometimes we'll talk about medication a little bit more, but sometimes even for a short period of time, just sort of to break that cycle and for the person to see that they're okay. I'll tell you, for me, I had, were any of you here in 70, God, I don't remember what year, somebody will remember, 76, there was a huge earthquake, Northridge earthquake. Yeah, I slept on my parents' floor for like a year, 71, yeah, I was little, 71. And it was very frightening. And those are the kinds of things, those are sort of little traumatic experiences when you feel unsafe. And so finally my dad gave me some Benadryl, and then once I slept all night for about 3 or 4 nights, I realized, okay, our house is still standing and I slept all night. So, sometimes a little bit of something really does help. I'm sure none of you have ever had a little bit of something, right? So the problem here, though, now getting to talking about children on the spectrum is, and this is a big problem, psychiatrists talk about it all the time, is really how do we define and measure anxiety in kids with ASD, okay? Because there are so many overlapping symptoms. Let's talk about sort of what the diagnostic criteria are, some of them. Let's say we've got someone who's really has resistance to change. Okay, so could that be, I really don't necessarily believe what I'm saying, but could that be the autism, or is that anxiety? Okay, just resistance to change and poor adaptability. Is that fear of what could happen with the change, or is it just something about the brain that says, I don't like change just because it is change, which would be autism, okay? You look at something like sensory issues, okay? So a child doesn't like to touch certain things or tags or scratchy surfaces or hearing certain things. Is that instilling fear? Is that anxiety? Or is that a sensory processing problem? So there's so many symptoms in autism that are part of the diagnostic criteria that also overlap with anxiety. Behavioral responses to the environment are very hard to interpret. If I stood up here right now and just started jumping up and down and flapping my ears, as I might do with a loud truck, my brother did that all the time, and it made me anxious because we'd be driving in the car, all of a sudden he'd just start going, na, 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 on his head, and then I would go like, oh my God, what is it? I'm serious. Don't your kids scare you sometimes? Yeah, he scares me. He still scares me. I mean, no, he does. And so the anxiety like becomes this thing of a whole system. We used to go camping, and my dad, mom, who made it 64 years, but we'd be driving, and my dad would go like, oh, there's not another gas station for 20 miles. And she'd go, Rod, don't push the panic button, which was, because my brother, you tell him, what? There's no gas stations? What are you talking about? And so the whole time we're on these trips, it would be like, don't push the panic button, And they had this exchange, because my dad was a little bit of one of those, oh my God kinds, and so, no. I mean, anxiety is really becomes, and it's hard to tell, like, is this autism? Is this an anxiety disorder? Because really the reason why this is important is, what do you do about it, okay? So, if it's sort of the autism, there's no pill for autism, There are interventions, there are helpful things, but there's nothing that's really going to change right now. Hopefully, someday there will be, that's going to change, what we call those core symptoms. But there is a lot we can do for anxiety. But the problem is, there's real lack of data on how we inform ourselves about how to best treat anxiety with kids with ASD if we can't even really interpret their symptoms, okay? So you or I, or your typically developing child, or your spouse, or your mother, or your coworker can come, say, God, my stomach's just been in knots today. I'm so nervous. I have that big test next week, and I can't sleep. And that person will rattle off their symptoms. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I have diarrhea. I'm breathing shallowly. I know, God, I'm just panicking. I don't know what I'm going to do. But your kid on the spectrum, who is just as anxious about the new camp as the next kid, can't necessarily even identify their own feelings all the time, right? I mean, that whole theory of mind thing, it's like realizing, a self versus another. Sometimes that self part, you can ask a kid a million times, or an adolescent, hey, how are you feeling? Fine. How, that sort of literal, I see a kid actually who's not on the spectrum, but he's like, his big toe is in the door. I mean, he's a quirky kid, and he takes things very literally, and unfortunately his father passed away a few years ago, and so he was telling me how he really missed him, and I said, I know you must really miss him, it must be really hard. Have you ever, now this is an 11-year-old, not a 2-year-old. I said, have you ever thought of writing your dad a letter? And he said, well, I can't. And I thought, you really thought I meant write your dad a letter and send him a letter? I meant like write what you'd like to say to him. What would you say to your dad? But he still kind of couldn't get that, So that child who really does need therapy, really does have issues with anxiety and peer, all that. I love the way you guys explained the peer stuff, that anxiety can feed on itself. And I think he is also depressed and sad about losing his father, but he can't really figure out his own feelings. And I think what happens is, it doesn't mean that it never happens, but it sure is delayed with kids on the spectrum, if they ever get there. Some do, some don't. My brother has told me, he wouldn't be depressed if people would just be nice to him. And a lot of people say to me, I've been talking about autism since I was in the 10th grade. One of my teachers asked me at Westridge to speak about it to my class, and I actually started volunteering at UCLA when I was in 11th grade. I'll say this for all of you who have other children. When and the whole group experience thing, when my brother had to be hospitalized one time in his life, actually twice, at UCLA at MPI, and they had a sibling support group there. And it was the first time anybody told me that this could kind of be a tricky, difficult situation that sucks, as a sibling. They said it all nicely, but there were other kids there with me. So I've had a lot of, I've been in the autism world for a long, long time. But sometimes my friends will say to me, and colleagues, coworkers will say, it must be so hard for you to have a sibling with autism. It must just be so. I said, you know what? The hardest person it is in my family, the the person who suffers the most is my brother. It's not me. I mean, it's been hard, but it's hardest for him. And so the anxiety and depression, I think, that comes from coping in a world. Sometimes I look at him and I say, I don't know how he goes outside every day. I mean, he lives independently with a bunch of ILS and a bunch of other stuff, and me, you know, kind of keeping him out there. But when I see what he has to face with people being mean to him, and, you know, he had the opportunity to live in some housing that would be with the UCP apartments. I don't know if you guys know about those, but for independent living. And he said, no, I want to live with the regular people, because when you are with the people who are disabled, everybody yells at you out of their car. You know, when I was a kid, people would try to ride over him with bicycles. So, you know, the ones who are aware enough, and my mother used to lament about this all the time to me once I was older, is like, did we bring him too far? Have any of you felt that way with your kids? Like, my brother was very, you know, he rocked, he walked, he did all the stuff. He still does some of it, but he also somehow was able to be responsible and independent out in the world. I don't know how that all went together, but he's pretty autistic, but somehow I think it's because, you know, he's got that intellectual thing that's, you know, he's really cognitively pretty sharp. But my mother used to always say, you spend all this time, energy, money, anguish to bring your kid to be with people, to interact, to talk, to have the back and forth, all these little tiny things that we have to take in little tiny packets and work on, only for the person that they finally get to talk to, like you said, to walk away from them or to call them a retard, or, you know. And so that's depressing to that individual. So anxiety, the feeling that I can always tell when my brother's anxious, because he starts rubbing his hands together, he'll pace in a different way. And all of you know when your kids or your spouses or your other people are anxious, and often was when he was going to be confronted with a new social situation. You know, parents, how many of you have like waited outside when you dropped your kid off somewhere and you don't want them to see you? You know, I've hidden places, you know. Yeah. I remember once my dad dropped my brother as a teenager off at a movie theater to meet a friend, but he dropped him in front. And my brother kind of stood there, and my dad was in the car, so was I, and I could tell my father was like, okay, just go, you know. But we drove around the corner like 7 times. We really did, to make sure he had gone. So that kind of anxiety isn't like, it's not anxiety that's unfounded, but it's still anxiety. You feel nervous. How many of you feel afraid for what's going to happen to your kids? Yeah. How many of you feel afraid of what's going to happen to you? Right. So the lack of clear and specific outcome measures really make it hard to predict effective treatment, especially, you know, for kids who are older. So talking about kids who have awareness, okay, and sort of enough interpersonal skills to really notice that they don't fit in, they don't know how to, they're not hip, they're not cool. They really can benefit, I think, from behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. But I think you need a certain awareness of yourself and your feelings to be able to really engage in that and benefit from it. But that is the first line therapy, to change your thoughts, which leads to changing your feelings, which leads to changing your behavior. And that's the best therapy really for anxiety and depression for adults who are typically developing kids as well. So that's a good question to ask. The problem is there are not a lot of cognitive behavioral therapists around. A lot of people will say they do cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's hard to find, especially for children. But you've got these two, but and there's some others. I won't mention them here, but there are only them. Yes. And then antidepressant medication is a treatment for, as you all know, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. The issue with SSRIs in kids on the spectrum is that a lot of behaviors that, especially children who are not as vocal, is not in tune with their own feelings, it's very hard to interpret those behaviors. So let's say we're talking about irritability, tantrum behavior, self-injurious behavior, right, that all of our kids have episodes of or have every day. An SSRI may not be the medication that will really have an effect on those symptoms, whether or not they're due to anxiety. And so some of the atypical antipsychotics, I know you all have heard of Risperdal and Abilify, are ones that are FDA approved to treat irritability, as well as self-injurious behavior and some stereotypic behaviors for kids on the autism spectrum. I think SSRIs, I have a few kids who I have on SSRIs who are on the spectrum. They tend to be kids who are a little bit higher functioning, a little bit more aware of their own feelings and anxiety, and can kind of tell me, or their parents can really use things, you know, like he wouldn't go to his friend's house for the last 4 times he was invited, now he's going. You know, he used to go to bed saying, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, you know, I don't know anything, nobody likes me, now he's having more, you know. I never believe in treating with medication with kids in general without there also being some psychotherapy or behavioral therapy, okay? Other antidepressants, now I went to a psychiatry conference recently who said medications like Ativan, Valium, those kinds, for kids who really have severe anxiety, severe tantrums, sometimes those need to be used and they're kind of underutilized in certain populations. So that child who's having the tantrums, very disruptive, where your family can hardly live, you know, can't transition or do anything, in addition to something like Risperdal, something like Xanax or Ativan may be beneficial to really get them to be more calm. So those are things to think about. So when we talk about family stress, okay, so what's there to be worried about, right? Isn't that what everybody say? You know, are people, what?
The sky is falling.
Yeah, the sky is falling. But you know, to be honest, when you're raising a child or a young adult, you know, who has special needs, especially a child with ASD, you know, not to make this depressing, but there's a lot to worry about. I'm a parent. I worry a lot, and my kids are all typically developing. They all, you know, none of us gets out scot-free. But I worry a lot about my brother. I honestly, he's 57, he's older than me, and I don't mean that he's childlike, but my relationship with him is that he's my 5th child. That's, you know, that's how I think of him. I'm very protective of him, and I worry a lot about him. I keep thinking there's only 2 of us. I'm taking care of my parents too, and I keep thinking, what's going to happen if something happens to me? What's going to happen to him? I worry about that more than what's going to happen to my 4 kids, because they're, you know, I've sent them to college. They're on their way. I know they'd be sad, but they just better make it. But my brother, well, I have a great husband too. But my brother, I really worry about my brother. I mean, I don't know what'll happen. So why worry? One thing I think that happens a lot, and we're talking about worry and depression, but is that you have to realize the diagnosis over and over. Okay, so every step of the way there's something else to worry about. So you've got the little kid who you're worrying about getting to talk. You know, you get them to talk, you get them to relate, you get them to do the back and forth, okay? Then they're in middle school and you got to worry about school now. So now you're worrying about their attention. Can they pay attention? Can they focus? Can they sit still? Can they follow directions? Or do they have a little ADHD going along? Then you start with that pre-teen, teen time. You've got the anxiety really kicking in, and also a lot of the aggressive, dysregulated behavior just kicks it. I don't know if it's hormonal, but it's just there. It's there. Especially, well, it seems to really be there with boys. I mean, the tantrums, the aggression, and it's the first time you're dealing with the fact that you're outsized sometimes now. That same child who you could pick up and say, here's time out, or you're going here, or whatever, that kid is like, oh no, I'm not, and what are you gonna do? And so that's a huge time of change, I think, when they become adolescents, and you what do you do? So I think you're realizing the diagnosis over and over. Like, I do this even with my brother, where I see him and I'm trying to convince him to not drink 4 gallons of milk a week. He's really obese. He's got high cholesterol. He's got diabetes. He's got all these health problems but he's just in my kitchen last Saturday. He's doing this and he's like, I just can't, you know, he gives me all these excuses. well, I don't drink that much. Well, it doesn't really bother me. He says, stress is what makes my glucose go high, not milk. And I'm like, no, milk has all that sugar. It's the milk. So we're arguing about that. And finally, he just kind of almost in a tearful sound, he says, I just don't like change. And then I said to myself, oh yeah, autism. You get what I mean? Like, you have to keep reminding yourself. So on my logic, it was logical. It was perfectly logical. And he even smart enough to know that I was being logical, but there's that big thing. He just can't change. He hates change, makes him afraid. So I was like, well, can you just have 3 instead of 4? I mean, I left it at that, you know? But my point is that you have to realize the diagnosis over and over, because at every stage of their development and growth, it presents itself in a different way. I was just talking to someone in the back who was saying, you know, mom here, who was saying that, you know, her child has really regressed as a young adult and a teen. And I think what happens is there's a cycle of grief that parents go through. Every time, you know, you say, okay, we're going to start with this intensive early intervention program between 3 and 6. If we do 40 hours a week, we'll do speech, we'll do OT, PT, you run yourself ragged, you quit your job, you ignore your other kids, you don't have your birthday. No, really, that's the life. I know. I sat in the park with my mom taking my brother all the way. Frostick School used to be in LA. And when I was 3, I rode with her to Frostick every day, and she took me to the park. It was kind of fun, actually, but it was. But my point is that you had this period of time where you were putting every single darn thing into your child because you were going to, maybe you couldn't cure it, but darn it, you were going to, you know, that child was going to progress more than, you know, anybody had ever seen, and you were going to, right? I mean, I would be that kind of mom, too. So then you kind of start realizing, he's still not talking. He still doesn't go to the potty. She still doesn't kiss me or say goodbye to me. And then you have the depression of the diagnostic time, when you get in the diagnosis, the dawning on you time. Then you go back through it again that, well, maybe, you know, all this gear up, it didn't really take me where I thought it was going to take me. So then you're depressed again. And then the next phase, I think, is this adolescent time. All these milestones that typical kids have that your child isn't having in the same way. They may have a great milestone, but there's a little bit of sadness in that when you say, wow, he's, you know, finally saying, Mama, I love you, and he's 15, you know, or going to the potty and he's 11. So he's made progress, yes, but it's still sad. I mean, it's just sad. There's no other, you know, you don't have to be sad every day. You don't have to live in the sadness. You don't have to live without joy. But if you think about it hard enough, it's sad. You know, it is. It is. But we're not the only ones who are sad. There are other people who are sad. That's why I remind myself all the time. There's other things. Autism is not the only thing. Okay? So that's what I tell myself. So the realizing the diagnosis over and over goes on with the parent. It goes on with the child who's aware enough to know, okay, all those phases. Siblings, like I said, I had, you know, there was a period of time, the same time my brother was hospitalized, my parents both got very depressed. I had rarely seen my father cry. They had put all that energy into my brother. We're standing outside the door at MPI. You know how they have those long glass things at, like, I don't know, psych wards, I don't know where but you can see on 2 sides of the door. So my brother's standing on this side, and both my parents are standing on this side. I'm kind of the background, and my father is like boo-hooing, you know. And so here again, our whole family, we all leave him there, but we all go home depressed, you know. And now the nice thing is, and this is where you can help siblings, I do a lot of presentations about siblings too, and sibling groups and things, is at my school, because our family was kind of going through this whole process, my mom wouldn't talk to them. And because I was having trouble with attention, focus, I didn't care. And it wasn't like I was so depressed, like, oh, life, you know, I still want to hang out with my friends, but I didn't give a crap about anything else because everything in my house, it was just sad. You know, it was kind of a down time, not for very long, but it was. And so what they did, have you guys ever read A Child Called Noah books? You should read those, because it's a really good, the guy's name is Josh Greenfield or Greenberg, A Child Called Noah. It's a series of like 3 books. And then the sibling of Noah just wrote a book about 3 years ago. And I just couldn't wait for it to come out because I felt like I had grown up with Noah, you know, and his brother, and then read it again. But anyway, my school, you know, was sensitive enough to say, okay, she doesn't have to write about the Revolutionary War. Have her write a book report on these books. I was in the 7th grade, and that was kind of a way that my family helped me cope with the fact that everybody was just kind of in a rut for really probably like the winter season, you know, it's just a bummer. So those are the kinds of things you can do with your kids or cousins or whoever, is getting them involved in groups like these guys have for siblings. There's also something called sib shops that a lot of the regional centers have. I don't know if you've heard of Alson's Tea at the Chata Tea Room, is something that's sponsored for siblings by Landerman Regional Center. So siblings, so you don't just worry about your child on the spectrum. How many of you worry about your other kids? Okay, so you worry about your other kids. And then you worry about your extended family. Well, look at her. I know, I saw you over there when you first came in. And then extended family, because that can be a real stressor. I mean, sometimes the family's embracing of your child. Other times they're like, take that kid away until he behaves. And you're in your head going, he ain't never going to behave, you know? So it's like, you know, when do I get to come over? I mean, so that's another area of anxiety. And also you have parents well-meaning. I'm sure your parents, you know, grandparents are always very well-meaning. You know, sometimes they think the behavior is because the child's spoiled, or you didn't do this or that, or you were just like that when you were a kid and you finally talked. So they can be anxious themselves and increase your anxiety. I've seen that a lot where, you know, parents will come to me, they'll bring grandma, and then they'll pull me aside and say, can you just not talk about the fact that he poops in his pants in front of my mother? You know, and I'm like, okay, you know, we won't talk about that. But it's not because the extended family is mean or not caring, but they're also worried. So it becomes this whole sort of system of worry. So anyway, these are the things I know you think about: independence of your child, functioning in the world, social relatedness and acceptance, milestones made and milestones missed, you know, the prom, the things like that, the siblings' well-being, financial problems. You know, it's a huge financial endeavor to raise a child on the spectrum. Relationship issues, whether, you know, they're friends or marriage, you might lose a lot of your friends. You become part of a community like this, which is a great community, but I also met someone, I used to actually be on the board of this organization years and years ago, and I can't remember who it was, but I don't see her now. But I always noticed something a little different about her, that everything that came out of her mouth wasn't about autism. And I kind of said, you know, I talked to her like after a meeting a little bit, and I go, you know, why are, you know, you're a little different. She goes, you know, my whole life just can't be autism. I'll shoot myself. You know, she's like, I have to. She had 2 other kids, and she's like, I have to have a life. And so I think, you know, your relationship with yourself, I mean, and your other kids, you know, your whole life can't be one thing, no matter what that one thing is. And then the whole cycle of grief isn't linear. You know, when they talk about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, where you go through the stages, you know, anger, acceptance, denial, blah, blah, blah. I know I didn't say them in the right order, but, you know why I don't say them in order? Because it goes like this. Sometimes you feel great. Your child will make a great milestone, and you really are happy. They're in a good spot. You found a great school for them. They have a friend. They have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They, you know, something that you've been waiting for, and it looks like it's a sustainable thing. You know, there's a lot to be happy about. But the thing is that you also know that there's going to be these cycles that come back up when challenges are encountered. So, fun for everyone. I try to really encourage people to have a good time together. You know, play groups, support groups, doing meditation. There's actually a meditation, I don't know if any of you live around here. I'm supposed to be bringing myself to this, but it's right here, I think, like right on this corner. It might be in this building. I don't know, but everyone says it's over right next to the Gamble House. There's a meditation. Oh, the neighborhood church. Okay, Monday nights. Oh, see, so the whole mindfulness thing is really, I think, good. You know, having fun with sports teams. I don't mean your kid joining a team necessarily, but your family doing, you know, fun things. Exercise, and just having time away from it all. How many of you feel guilty about that? How many of you have like overcome that? Like yeah. Oh, he's yeah. But yeah, the whole, and you know, I think also when we're so intensely involved with our kids, it annoys them. I mean, you know, so being removed, don't feel guilty. They kind of like it when we're not always around, especially adolescents, right? So if you can find a person who you feel like, you know, let's face it, a weekend away from any particular therapy is not going to hurt anybody. A week away. And if you find someone who is loving, they don't even have to, honestly, they don't have to be loving. They have to be safe. right? No, really, they have to be safe. You know, I remember when there was that whole sleep training movement where you let your kid cry. I could never do it. Even though I was a pediatrician, I was supposed to tell everybody to do that. I couldn't do it with my kids. But there were some times in life where I was so tired and so worn down, I had this philosophy in my head. It's like, okay, it's you or me, kid. You know, like, if I don't somehow get you to like chill out, I'm falling apart. And that's when I could let my kid cry, because I knew that they needed me to be intact. So, you know, the whole oxygen on yourself before your child, really, that's what they tell you in the airplane. If we're going down, put the oxygen, because you can't help your kid or anyone unless you put the oxygen on yourself, and not feeling guilty. Okay, so I've given you some handouts that I want you to, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these subjects, but this is a really good one about whether or not your child should take medication. I didn't go into detail about medication. Probably most of you, if you have a child over the age of 6, have had somebody bring up the issue of medication, right? Whether it's medication for ADHD, medication for explosive tantrum behavior, medication for anxiety, or depression. There's basically 3 major categories that are used of medications to treat kids on the spectrum. One is the SSRIs I already talked about, which address anxiety and depression. The other one is the atypical antipsychotics, which I talked about a little bit, which is Abilify and Risperidol. And then the third category is the stimulants that treat ADHD symptoms, impulsivity, inattention, and things like that. There's a lot to be thought about with medication. You need to find people who really know what they're doing. But this toolkit put out by Autism Speaks, I think, has some really good things to think about. It talks about the different types of medications. In my opinion, when behaviors or symptoms are so interfering, and this includes yourselves, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not so depressed that I need medication. But most people I've met who've had a period of sadness, tearfulness, not wanting, you know, all the things, not sleeping well, eating too much, eating too little, once they go on meds, they're like, why didn't I do this before? They say, I've been depressed for 10 years and I didn't know it. You know what I mean? Because, so I'm not a medicine pusher. I don't believe in just putting people on meds for any reason. But there are things that really can help us to feel better. And since they're available, you know, if you have those times where you feel like you just can't go on, you know, talk to your primary care physician can prescribe them, psychiatrists can prescribe them, developmental behavioral pediatricians can prescribe medications for your kids. So, you know, I'm not saying just go out there and grab a pill, but at the same time, don't put it off your radar, because there is some benefit. I really believe that. So you want to look at, are symptoms interfering with functioning, learning, or even just a sense of well-being? If somebody just feels miserable, they deserve not to feel miserable. I mean, I don't think it has to be that you can't get up and go to work. You know, if you're just miserable, you need to feel better. With the kids, are maladaptive behaviors such as aggression, self-injurious behavior, or stereotypical behaviors part of the picture? And this is really important, because what I try to remind parents is, your kid can't learn from their therapies. You know, if you're doing 40 hours a week of ABA, like your child is tantruming through 35 hours of that, like really, are they really learning anything? You're wasting your time, the ABA provider's time, the funder's money, and I'm not saying that medication has to be given along with those therapies, but if there's not progress being made, and if that's because the symptoms are those that are effectively treated with medications, then that's when I would really consider it. That's the same thing I say to people who have comorbid ADHD, or their kids just have ADHD. There's a lot of people who are distracted, artsy-fartsy, you know, not focused, impulsive. If they're functioning, they're doing their art, they're paying their bills, who cares? I mean, it's not that we're trying to get everybody to be the same and not have quirky things about them, but if you can't function, if you can't finish a book, if you can't take the test, then it's a problem and you need some help with it. So medication should target symptoms. This has been a thing, I think, where a lot of people who felt that medication's been pushed at them, where you always want to ask somebody when they say, let's think about this medicine. You say, well, what symptom are we targeting? Like, what is this for? And your doctor should make it very clear. I have a little kid with pretty severe oppositional defiant disorder who's also got ADHD. And I was telling the mom, like, this is going to help this thing, but that other part of him, the therapy is going to help that. because there is no medicine for being oppositional. There's behaviors, there's ways you can respond to his oppositionality, but the ADHD medicine isn't going to help that. So you want to ask anybody who says that your child or you need medication, okay, what is this specifically targeting, and how will I tell if it's working or not? There are a lot of rating scales that we use for ADHD symptoms, as well as depression, as well as anxiety, that I will have kid fill out. There's some that kids can fill out, as well as parents, to see, okay, now we're on the med, are we having more circled or less circled items that say I'm fearful, I can't sleep, I'm scared somebody's in my closet. So, so again, with depression, it's not typical. A lot of kids have a poor sense of self-worth because things are really hard for them. And one of the things I think really helps in this regard, and you have to figure out when it's the right time. I actually wrote an article for a newsletter at CHLA at the Boone Fetter Clinic, and I gave you a copy. It's the one with the purple, and it's called Talking to Your Child About an Autism Diagnosis. Because I think it's really hard for kids who are very challenged in the world, who are aware that they're challenged and they don't know why. And so I recommend reading this. It has some things about best times to talk to your child, how to go about it, how to talk about strengths and challenges, and that they're still okay, that autism doesn't define who they are, but that they need to understand why things are hard for them. Because then if you don't understand why something's hard for you, you just think something's wrong with you, and you're, like the kids will say, I'm just a piece of crap, That's not to make an excuse for certain behaviors. Some parents worry about that, but I think helping them, the ones who can, understand why things are challenging, or why they're always being reminded or having therapies or things, can help them feel better and not be as likely to become depressed. So I just recommend that you read that. Irritability is a huge one, but that's just a part of autism also. That's why I'm saying there's so much of this overlapping. But you're looking for changes. Sadness, inertia, poor sleep, lack of interest in usual things. Same sort of treatments. I won't go through all of this. But also interventions that target whatever is really bothering the person. I think you talked about this. So if you have if the kid feels like they're a piece of crap, quote unquote, nobody likes them. That's what you hear about from the young adolescents. Nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. I'm a loser. Well, if you're getting a social skills group, or a special group of people who, the Lego club or whatever the child's interested in, that can help them feel better about themselves, somebody sharing their interests. So that's something I always recommend. Okay, suicidal ideation. It is part, or can be part, of depression. How many people believe that? Right? Some of us have experienced these feelings ourselves. Some of us have had children who've experienced the feelings, spouses, parents, our own siblings. I think that it's not something that we can ignore when someone's depressed. You can't ignore it in yourself, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. So I think talking to a mental health professional is really important. The first thing you'll be asked about, or your child will be asked about, is their thoughts. So do you ever think about, it not being worth it or ending it all? You'd be surprised at how many kids, not successfully, but do some little gestures, acts, things who are younger than you'd think. I had a guy, a patient of mine who's on the spectrum and, higher functioning, but sort of those self-esteem things with social stuff. He's like in middle school, and he climbed over a railing at his school on the second story. Now, some people said, well, it was attention seeking. It wasn't really that he was going to jump, but those kinds of things have to be, seriously addressed. So I still don't know. That's the hard part of having kids on the spectrum. A lot of the behaviors that people present, even as young adults or older adults, you just really don't know why. So that's part of the anxiety as a parent or a caregiver, is the angst you feel with, what do I make of this? So a lot of things we all experience, we kind of know what to do if it happens. But with our kids on the spectrum, our adults on the spectrum, we don't know what the heck to do because we don't know even what it means. Like the kid who was on the building. I really don't know if he was really suicidal or not. But you have to have an awareness of it. So that's all I want to talk about. The biggest risk for suicide of all these is, guess which one? Means? No? A previous attempt. That's really when somebody has said, I tried this before. So, somebody who's really tried that's, psychiatric, real, hardcore psychiatric intervention is really important in those cases. But making your homes safe in terms of means is very important. So not, all this stuff that's been in the news about Sandy Hook and the kid who was up at Santa Barbara, who knows what their diagnoses really were. But the A word came out, the Asperger word, the autism word, it all came out. But the one thing to learn and to know, and that's true even with your typically developing kids, is having things like firearms in your home, having dangerous things that are easily, because one thing that's very true about adolescents, as you all know, is adolescents are very impulsive. So what they're finding is it's not necessarily that these kids are ruminating and thinking about suicide on a daily basis. Something frustrating happens, some major letdown, upset, and this is not just true with kids on the spectrum. And then, it's usually a sequence of things, bad grades, their friends reject them, some social media thing, girlfriend breaks up, and the kid is really, really depressed at that moment, and they're impulsive, just the same way they're impulsively have sex. It's just impulsive. And so, so not having the means for someone to be impulsive is smart. And that's just true, I think, so firearms especially, big giant knives, families who have sharp swords, things like that. It's just, especially if your kids have problems with anger management or self-injurious behavior anyway, you want to make sure that you don't make it, so that they have access to ways they can harm themselves or harm anyone else. Okay, I'm going to finish. Medication side effects, I think people are always afraid of them. Most of these medicines I'm really talking about are pretty safe. SSRIs, which are those for anxiety and depression, nausea, diarrhea, headache, decreased energy, initial insomnia. Some people have nightmares. These are sort of, of course there are lists, I could give you this long, but these are the main things. Dry mouth. There are black box warnings about suicidal ideation. The studies have shown that nobody had made any increased attempts on these medications, but there was an increase in suicidal ideation of adolescents and young adults who take SSRIs. So that's why I sort of talked about suicide a little bit. Now what's interesting is that when given for depression, there was a higher incidence of suicidal ideation. When given for anxiety, there was less likely to be a higher incidence of suicidal ideation. Sort of speaking to what you were talking about, how they could sort of feed on each other. And then the atypical antipsychotics are the ones that you need to have blood drawn beforehand, where they can cause metabolic syndrome, with high glucose, high triglycerides, and obesity. And so you need to make sure if somebody puts your kid or you or anybody on that, they're getting a good physical and blood draws when they start the medication, then every 3 months, and then after that, like every 6 months. Okay, so here, those are your handouts I have for you. So disclosing the diagnosis is this one. Should your kid take medicine? What's a developmental behavioral pediatrician? And I left some resource materials about support groups from Lannerman. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yes. The question was when there's a concern about taking benzodiazepines and addiction in children on the spectrum being treated for anxiety. And I think it really depends on the dose and the frequency and the child. So I hate to say this way, but this is really the way I think of a lot of things, okay? Everything's cost benefit, right? In life. It's cost benefit. So if your child is a child where having a dependence on a substance would be more harmful to them than the benefit that the medication provides them on a daily basis, then I wouldn't give it to them. But for some of our kids who are really low functioning, and I'm just putting it out there, they are on benzodiazepines 3 and 4 times a day, every day. Those are kids who are more likely placed, or kids who really just have such disruptive behavior that they can't function. So let's say you have a child who's higher functioning, but these medications take the edge off. That's the child I'd be more concerned about becoming addicted. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the cost benefit thing. It's like if this kid has other things that they're going to be able to do at a higher level, you don't want that to get in the way. Now, I know I haven't answered your question about a dose and frequency because I don't know the answer.
Well, also like SSRIs, what we worry about too, besides just being dependent, is it'll stop working because they'll get so tolerant that the medicine stop working.
But the thing is, there are a lot of different medications. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. So the question is with SSRIs and dosing, and will they become tolerant to the medication? That can happen. I think you usually, if you find an effective medication with an effective dose, you usually have a little bit of time that it will continue to work, a couple of years. The nice thing is that there are lots of SSRIs, that can be used and work a little bit differently, so that it's not necessarily that a person will become tolerant to the whole class as much as maybe one particular one versus another. And it also depends on what you're treating. If you're using an SSRI for depression and the person's still depressed, then the SSRI hasn't worked.
I'm thinking about SSRIs for anxiety or for OCD. And I think a lot of our kids, you hear how they end up with paradoxical effects. Like they get the SSRI and suddenly they become disinhibited and all the aggression goes on.
I know. It's very difficult. Yeah, and SSRIs are very difficult. In fact, there's some psychiatrists I've talked to who really feel like they're contraindicated in autism. There are others who use them with great frequency. So you're right, there is a paradoxical effect, and they tend to be more effective at low doses, which a lot of people don't understand. So they'll think they're not working. Like I said, unfortunately, and this is not, I wish it were better, but sometimes you're trading off symptoms. You're trading off a child who's disinhibited, but they'll go to school every day. They're talking too much as compared to not talking at all. And a lot of times it's just weighing, what those things are. I mean, that's kind of true with us too. I mean, if you think about it, some of these medications cause minor weight gain, So for me, I'm like, okay, if I have to go on a medicine, I'll go on the one that just causes a little bit of weight gain. If I got to gain a lot of weight, I'm just not doing it. I don't care. So, but that's not true. If I had to save my life, I would do whatever. But that's what I'm saying. We always are, and I wish I had a different thing to say, but that's really what it is. They all have side effects. And so we're always balancing as prescribers sort of the benefit of the effect that it's intended for as compared to the side effects. And sometimes you can get that really good balance where there's a minor side effect or none, but a lot of times, like you said, our kids don't respond in the same way, and it's just very tricky, which is why you have to go to somebody who has experience dosing kids. And you also have to be tolerant of a lot of changes, though. That's what's hard, too, because there's a lot of, how many of you have already done this? I mean, where you try one thing, try another thing, let's do this, and then certain combinations. And if your child is really, really tricky, I think, going to a child psychiatrist is important, to find the, sorry, I wish I had better, well, I really wish we had better drugs, and I'm not responsible for that, so, yes.
Dr. Richard, if a child is taking benzos very, very frequently, don't you then need to be very careful about just stopping them?
Oh, yes, and there's several medications like that. SSRIs should not be abruptly stopped. The antipsychotics like risperidone and Abilify should not be abruptly stopped. There's a group of medications, the alpha agonists like guanfacine and clonidine, which are really good for sleep issues, by the way. We didn't really talk about that. They should not be abruptly stopped. Stimulants, the ADHD meds, they can be stopped and started pretty easily. And all of those classes of medications will cause different problems if they are abruptly stopped. That doesn't mean if you miss one dose, something horrible is going to happen, but because of how they affect the receptors. Yes. You want to stand up?
I wanted to comment upon positive stress when we were discussing the treatment plans. I found sort of a contradiction. Okay, we build up a positive family activity, it creates the steam, and then our expectations are raised, and then we crash down again, and it kind of cycles, and we're building up and crashing down and building up. And so addressing that, it's like you don't want to stay even because then there's no change. You have to be kind of willing to ride that, but it is a lot of.
It's stressful. Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah. You have to know that it's just, it's gonna, I mean, this is true with everybody, but it's like something gets better. Isn't that true in marriage? How many people in here are married or in a relationship? I mean, it's like, one day you're like, oh, this is the best person, we've been great together, and then it's like, 2 weeks later, it's like, why the heck did I ever marry this person? And you do that with your kids. I think that the thing is the expectations. I think sometimes it's not that you discount a good time, but you also know that in a child with special needs, especially with behavior problems, there's probably going to be something right around the corner. It's kind of like taking your kid to the birthday party when they were 2. They have a great time, they love it, they're excited, you're smiling, it's great, and they get home and they scream for the next 4 hours because they were just overstimulated, they're too tired, they're cranky, it was too much for them. And so I think just kind of preparing yourself, my brother falls apart every holiday. I'm just prepared for it. And I don't set him up. Like one time I gave him a gift card to Vroman's, the bookstore over here, and it was when gift cards first came out and he didn't really understand how it worked. So he's smart. I always say he's just smart enough to get himself into trouble that he can't get himself out of. Okay, so he's not a great problem solver. But what he did was he took the card and he bought something for like $1. Let's say I'd given him $40. And he said, okay, give me my $39. And they're like, no, that's not what we do. We don't give you the money back. You get a credit. You can come back and get something until you use it all. Well, he thought they were cheating him. Very literal. It was like, that's my money. But always in the holidays, he took the table like that, turned it over in Romans. The police were called, and whenever I see police, I've had police at my door quite a few times. Now that's what's great about living in a community that because the police know him. So they come and say, are you Rodney Richards' sister? Yes, I am. I was like, oh God, first I'm always scared they're gonna say something happened to him. But then I'm like, what did he do now? But the holidays, the holidays I always know, just like everybody else. That's the hard part. They're just like everybody else in one way, and then they're so not like anybody else in another way. And that's always changing. So yeah.
You were talking about before how it's so common to see a lot of aggression in the adolescent teenagers, male. In your experience, having seen patients over a long period of time, is there like a common time when that worst period is over that we can move forward? Yes, I love that question.
Well, I think early adulthood, 18, 19, I'm serious, hormones, testosterone is the aggression hormone. So but also depends on what you do during that time. I think that might be a time when you need to have, more intervention. You might get an aide or somebody, another guy who works, it's shifting things around. I think, I haven't seen, there's some kids who come out of it. Unfortunately, there's some people that's sort of kind of how they end up, that with that aggressive, but I think it's not stopping the interventions. I think that's the problem. Don't say I said this, but like with their whole regional center approach. It's like, okay, you got this when your kid was little. Well, it's not that you keep doing the same thing forever, but you have to keep doing things forever. They might be different and tweaked in different ways. So I think getting intervention, again, that's appropriate for whatever your child is showing then. And working, I think, medication sometimes. Yes?
How problem with the fact that all these interventions are geared towards high-functioning children and moderate to low-functioning children have a lot of challenges going through adolescence, and everything is geared towards ABA. And I asked the interventionist, and I said, so what does he have to look forward to? What can I tell him so he can look forward to? He said, well, maybe he can get a computer when he's 18. I said, that's what he's going to, because he has a lot of anxiety about becoming an adult. And I feel like it doesn't really answer our, developmentally, maybe he is very young in a lot of ways, but he's also 15, and he has a lot of anxieties and desires and frustrations, and that cause him to be difficult, to put it mildly. And you can't just say, okay, well, if you don't bite, that, then you're going to get a milkshake when you're 15 years old, And it's just like, we don't talk to them as if they're people when they're lower functioning. Everything's about just giving them the same rewards. And I just wish there were more options available for teenagers or older kids who are more challenged, who are not geared toward 2-year-olds. So behavioral and approach. I have nothing against behaviorism. I've used it for years, but it just doesn't seem to really do it when they have anxieties that they notice they're really messed up. Like,
Well, have you guys ever noticed, I think about this all the time, honestly, with my brother, is like, why can't people on the spectrum just have joy? Like, why isn't there a place that you could go and repetitively play video games with other people? I mean, it's like, you know, I kind of, you know, I don't know if any of you've been to Club 21, you know, for, the, you know, but that kind of thing, like, I don't know, I just feel like we're always trying to change everyone. Now, of course, the maladaptive behaviors, but why not, you know, there's no social place for them to go be social. It's all about learning and teaching something, but what about just being? I don't know, you know? That's a weird way of thinking, but living with it for as long as I have, I just think, why, you know, my dad would always, don't let him have this, don't let him have that. I'm like, my God, he's so, you know, he doesn't have hardly anything in life, let him have it. You know, you know, that's kind of my thing.
I'm sorry, for us, the online gaming really works well. There's no eye contact, but he makes all these friends.
Right.
Online that he talks to. He wears a headset.
Yeah.
He talks to them
Yeah.
and he loves it.
Yeah,
And
that's
he
a
can play
great,
it over and over as long as he wants.
yeah.
It's appropriate and talks appropriately and doesn't give out
Wow.
personal information.
Oh, no, yeah, he doesn't give out personal information, but there's cuss words. They learn cuss words from the
Right.
people that they're playing with.
But that's normal too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Do you guys have anything else do you want to ask them any questions? Yeah. Okay.
You were talking about therapy for families or couples. Would you suggest somebody who knows about autism
You know,
might be more helpful? Because I've had therapies before where, like, when my son was still, he's 23 now, but where the therapist would look at my husband and I like, well, what are you talking about? It was before he was diagnosed, so.
yeah, I think so. I think also it's kind of, I think you have to look at how you're responding to it also. Like sometimes, let's say, you know, your response is to fight a lot or somebody's, you know, not supportive or, I mean, I don't know. I think, yes, they need to know, but it's more likely that someone needs to have expertise in how you two are manifesting the stress of it. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think it has to be.
There's a conflict between, other people have this, I assume they do, a conflict between parenting styles.
Right.
I assume that's.
Then you need somebody who really does understand it, yes. But if it's just about, you know, anxiety or depression related to it, I don't think necessarily. Because I think those are kind of commonly shared feelings that people have about loss of any expectation they had in life. But if it's about the behaviors or about, you know, parenting especially, I think people really do have to know, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I do some couples work with parents of kids on the spectrum, and it's really helpful for me, I think, to be familiar with what they're talking about. And they have gone through just kind of, whoever asked the question about kind of going through different developmental stages, at each developmental milestone, there's a new process for the parents to get used to. And so I've been working with a couple who have an 18-year-old who's graduating high school, and they're so excited for that to happen, and now there's kind of a grieving point again of like, oh, he graduated high school and I'm ready to send him out, but he's not ready to go. And so just kind of what that means and how long is this parenting process gonna go. So, I mean, I think it totally depends on the presenting issue, but if you have a child on the spectrum, I mean, that it's typically a factor somewhere. So having a therapist, a marital therapist that does have that background, I think can really help.
Well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.